The U.S. president wanted blue. Washington, D.C. got green instead. Take a look at this. This is the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, one of America's most symbolic views. Recently, the pool was drained, resurfaced, and painted in what President Trump called American flag blue. Now, it reopened on June 6th, and then the algae came. Then the coating began peeling. An act of nature? Well, President Trump is blaming vandalism. He says people slashed the coating, possibly dumping fertilizer in the water. Several people have been arrested, but the public has yet to see any evidence clearly indicating that vandalism caused the algae to explode or the paint to peel. What was supposed to be a part of America's 250th birthday facelift is getting uglier almost by the day. Questions are rising about the use of public money, no bid contracts, even the appearance of favoritism possibly coming from the White House. Here's what President Trump said on Tuesday.
National Guard and police have been all over the mall. How would these vandals have gotten so close to do something like that?
Do you have any proof of this? I mean, we didn't have a lot of them then. Who would think that somebody would go into a pool and take a knife and start cutting it?
But do you have proof of that?
Yeah, we have proof.
Photos or videos?
Well, let's put it this way. When you have a 350, I think it's 350, not 250, a 350-foot slit from one end to the other, you think that's proof? You think that's proof?
Reporters have been down there today looking for that slit that you mentioned, and there's no evidence of it.
All you'd have to do is see the Parks Department. They'll show it to you. Or see the secretary. But I saw it. They cut it. They cut it very violently. The same thing with the floor. They cut it. And then they lifted it. They pulled it. And that's what it is.
All right, that's what the U.S. president is saying. For more now, we want to go to our very own Janelle Dumoulin. She's in Washington covering this story for us. Janelle, start with what people can actually see. I mean, when visitors go to the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool today, what does it look like?
You know, Brent, it actually looks a little bit different from how it did in the past days. There now also appears to be fencing going up around the reflecting pool. So I guess that's to limit the number of people wanting to engage with the pool as they have done. Beyond that, however, it actually doesn't look as bad as it did in terms of the algae, as bad as it did in the past days. I mean, that's been reduced by quite a bit. But of course, it's still a greenish looking pool. There's a lot of algae around the corner still. It's been so hot in D.C., so the algae forms really quickly. And of course, the faking blue paint on the bottom is still an issue. And of course, there's the National Guard around the area as well. Yeah,
I mean, it feels like events, transpired quickly here. How did the reflecting pool go from showcase to green embarrassment?
Yeah, so it escalated quickly, as the kids say, from when it was filled back with water to today. That's under 20 days. So it was just last month in May when Trump was saying that this pool would last for 50 years. And then in the middle of June, you began to see the algae forming and the pool turning green. So it really has become this cautionary tale against grandiosity. You had what was designed to be a reflecting space. It's in the name. It's called the reflecting pool. And now it's a spectacle. It's attracted a lot of people coming to basically shake their heads and take pictures of the green water and the peeling paint and the algae. So probably not at all what the president envisioned.
Yeah, I mean, it was supposed to be part of President Trump's beautification push before America's 250th anniversary. And instead, the visuals are, as you said, algae, loose coating, and tourists filming the damage. How much of this has become a political problem for the White House?
Well, at the very least, it's not helpful. It's enough of a political problem for the White House that they appear to be seeking to deflect blame. We saw it, you saw it yourself. Every time the president has made an appearance in front of the cameras, he's asked about the reflecting pool. He's pressed on his claims about vandalism and sabotage. And I think it's also not helpful that the reflecting pool is obviously accessible to everyone. Everyone can see with their own eyes how things may have gone wrong. And it's an extremely visual reminder of the fact that not everything goes the president's way. At the very least, it's a further knock to his credibility and I guess his ability to get things done or to show that he can get things done.
President Trump is making two central claims here. One, that someone cut the coating. Two, that someone may have put fertilizer or chemicals into the water. I want us to hear more of what he has said about that. Take a listen.
We also fixed the reflecting pool. In fact, if you go over there right now, it looks very good. It's up. Somebody said fertilizer in the water. If you put fertilizer in the water, you get algae.
So I want to be clear on this, Janelle. Are federal agencies, are they providing evidence, to support what the president has said, or are they mostly pointing back to the president's statements?
So because this is Washington, D.C., you'll have any number of agencies that could be connected to this. The Interior Department, the U.S. Park Police, Metropolitan Police of D.C. So basically, the Interior Department has confirmed enforcement actions. An Interior Department spokesperson said that 5 people have been arrested, 5 people were issued federal citations, and that 14 police reports have been filed for vandalism. So that differs from what Trump said, of course, of 6 or 7 arrests, but it's at least around the same ballpark. But we don't have evidence from these officials that someone deliberately slashed the pool's lining or sabotaged the water. So Trump said the images of this alleged cut would be released in court, quote, at the right time. We don't know exactly when that is.
Now, we know that draining the reflecting pool, painting it, all of this cost about $16 million, and we know that the president personally pushed this project. The contracts were no bid, so they weren't, they didn't say who's got the lowest bid, that's who we want to go with. So how is the administration defending the way that this project was awarded?
Well, basically, the justification of how fast this contract was awarded and the fact that there were no bid contracts was the tight deadline of July 4. Remember that the president wanted to get this done in time for those July 4 celebrations. So there's an exemption called the unusual and compelling urgency exemption, and that's what they're citing today. So just a little bit of background, of course. This has also been very controversial because we know that the contractor, Atlantic Industrial Coatings, has also had some personal ties to Trump. They worked on his pools at Trump's golf club in Sterling, Virginia. I think that is the known link to him. That is since a link that the White House has tried to walk back, saying that there were no personal ties between the president and the contractors. But yes, this is the sort of awarding process that has raised many questions indeed.
Yeah, it certainly raises the question, what can your connections really get you these days? I guess we're going to have to keep posing that question. Janelle DeMalone for us in Washington on this story for us. Janelle, as always, thank you. Well, this may be a political problem, but it will and can only be solved with science. Algae does not care who is president. Paint does not care about national holidays. So what went wrong in the reflecting pool, and how can it be fixed? Well, this sounds like a job for Steve Goodell, a pool and water system specialist, better known as Swimming Pool Steve. Steve, it's good to have you with us. You and I were talking, and I said, I assume you're in high demand at the moment. Is that true?
Yes, thank you for having me. And yes, I am in unusually high demand for what, I'm normally up to, at this time of year. I'm always busy. It's summertime here where I live, and I am Swimming Pool Steve after all. But no, global media attention is not something I normally have to deal with.
Well, you usually deal with swimming pools, if I've understood that correctly, but the reflecting pool, it's a little different, isn't it? It's long, shallow, exposed to the elements nonstop. To me, it sounds more like a pond than it does like a swimming pool. Am I getting that correct?
I would tend to agree with that. You could call it a lot of things. An architectural water feature might be one of them, or a man-made shallow lake. There's a lot of things you could refer to. It's certainly different than a swimming pool, probably defined most differently just simply by a swimming pool is a sanitized. We use a chemical sanitizer. We make the water sterile, and there's nothing alive in that water when you go swimming in what people know commonly as a swimming pool. And in a natural environment like this, you don't use chlorine. It's more like in conjunction with nature, using wildlife and plant matter growth and oxidation of the water versus chlorination of the water.
You know, President Trump wanted the pool to be painted American flag blue. That was the color that he wanted. And just days later, the water turned green. Were you surprised by this change and that it was so quick?
Definitely surprised. Not that something like this couldn't be, expected to happen. It's just that given the size and scope of the project and the attention that it's under, you obviously would have wanted this to go well and not turn green if you were working on this project. But no, working with aquatic systems, these things are complicated. My honest take on the matter was when I saw it happen for the very first time, my initial reaction is, yeah, they will do that sometimes.
I mean, I understand that the administration has used hydrogen peroxide and ozone nanobubbles. Could you kind of give us a crash course in what that is?
Sure. On the surface level here, I mentioned chlorine earlier in a swimming pool and not chlorine in a natural water environment like this. And that's what the hydrogen peroxide is. It's a way to add an oxidizer to the water. And the nanobubble system is the same thing, just it's not a chemical that you're manually pouring into the water. It's, a mechanical system that's designed to create oxidizer, which is added to the water. So two different ways of accomplishing the same thing.
Well, is it possible, as a layman here looking at this situation, I can imagine that with the reflecting pool, there could be some type of filter that could be built in, or there could be some type of pump that would at least keep the water at the bottom moving a little bit so that you wouldn't have any stagnation going on. Is that possible, or was there anything like that already installed in the reflecting pool?
Well, what I can speak to here is that when you maintain a body of water like this, filtration is a critical component. And I don't have enough specifications on just how adequate the current filtration system is, other than I understand that it is something that has been slated for future improvements to try to increase its capacity. And if we were to have a situation where it was undersized for the size of the body of water, some 6.5 million gallons of water, yes, you would have probably, you do need to remove things from the water as part of the management system.
Well, with the hydrogen peroxide, with the ozone nanobubbles, if you kill the algae that we can see, have you solved the algae problem?
Well, not really, because that algae is still there, and the food for the algae is now being redeposited into the water. So the algae dies, but the phosphates and the nitrates that it uses as a nutrient source, well, they're still there now. Now they're available again in the water, and it's kind of this cycle that can keep repeating over and over again. And the way that you remediate this is multiple fold, but one of the primary methods is adding a lot of oxygen to the water creates an oxygen rich environment, and that is a primary method of controlling the release of phosphorus from the sediment layer that would be in the bottom of this or any pool. That sediment layer usually would be the primary nutrient source for algae growth.
President Trump has suggested that fertilizer may have been dumped into the water, and that would feed algae, correct?
That is definitely true. Fertilizer would feed algae, and swimming pools, which again I deal with quite often, phosphate levels are something that it's so important. We measure it in parts per billion versus parts per million, which we do for a lot of other water chemistry variables that we monitor. The more phosphates available in the water, the more food source available for algae to grow. And it's not kind of like it's a lot. It's like a prolific growth that you can experience. And even at relatively low level of phosphates in water, you can have a lot of trouble to manage it and prevent it from turning green. But these are things that we should be able to measure. We should be able to measure the reflecting pool and know the available phosphate levels. And I would be very interested to know the phosphate levels of the source water used to fill the reflecting pool.
I've also been told to ask you, did the American flag blue paint or coating, did that contribute to the algae growth at all?
Well, I would have to make the reasonable assumption that it did at least contribute to this. When you have a darker interior surface, especially in 338,000 square feet of surface area absorbing sunlight, that water is going to be warmer than a comparable pool with a lighter color. Warmer water does equal more prolific algae growth.
Last month, the president's armored vehicles, a convoy, was seen driving along the bed of the reflecting pool. What does that kind of weight do to the paint and the sealant that has been applied?
Well, surprisingly, for all the things I've done in the aquatics industry, I've never had to drive an armored vehicle over any of my recently completed projects. So I
Imagine
can't
that.
actually say what happens when you do that. But I can speculate that that interior surface is so incredibly strong. If it was installed well and there was no problems or deficiencies with it, in theory, I think it would be okay. I can't say for sure, I'm only speculating, but in
Mhm.
theory, I can't see that damaging a well bonded type of surface like this.
I want to ask you, you're in Ontario, Canada, correct?
That is correct.
How much does it cost for in the summer for a family that has a backyard swimming pool? What would they probably spend on average to keep the pool maintained and to keep the water clean?
A few hundred on the low end to a few thousand on the high end for the average swimming pool for annual usage.
And let me ask you, as a businessman, the project for the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. cost $16 million, and we ended up with a blue algae mess. Did the American taxpayer, did they get enough bang for their buck?
No, that's really outside of my area of expertise, so I really wouldn't feel comfortable commenting on that, except to say the size and scale of this project is simply immense, and it would take me a long time to arrive at the right number myself to do something like this.
Mhm.
But on the surface level, I can only just say I would expect it to be expensive to take on a
Okay.
project of this scale.
The reflecting pool was supposed to be blue and shiny, shiny like new for the July 4th holiday, America's 250th birthday. Does Swimming Pool Steve think that that plan will sink or swim now?
I think that whoever is responsible for making that happen is going to move heaven and earth to make sure that it's blue when it's supposed to be on the 4th of July. I can't say that it's going to happen. Obviously,
Mhm.
it's encountered some hiccups along the road here, but I do understand that remediation efforts are taking place, and perhaps it will be ready.
All right, Swimming Pool Steve Goodell joining us from Canada. Steve, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and we appreciate you sharing your expertise. I think they're going to be needing that in Washington in the next few weeks.
Thank you so much.
You.
I appreciate you having me.
So, what do you think about this renovation gone wrong melodrama? Who do you think is really to blame for the public relations fiasco that is the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool? And will the president get this placid centerpiece of patriotism restored in time for the big celebration? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Send them to us. And for all of us here in Berlin, thanks for being a part of the conversation. We will see you next time.